In the United States, nearly 73% of non Caucasian children are adopted into Caucasian families, and 84% of international adoptions are transracial, according to Jane Whittington in her article Inside Transracial Adoption Stories of Adversity, Acceptance, and Intentional Love, published in Rapid Growth. There are many different perspectives regarding interracial adoption, some of which I addressed in my second speech, such as race should not be a priority at all while finding children in the foster care system a permanent home. Race should be a priority, and no matter what you believe, if interracial adoption is going to occur, precautions need to occur also. When dealing with children's lives, the priority needs to be finding each child in the foster care system a permanent home that can support all of their needs, rather than waiting and attempting to find that child a home of which is the same race. With that being said, race should not be ignored. We know that interracial adoption is going to occur, but what matters is what happens after the child is adopted. The race and culture difference between the child and their family should be addressed and acknowledged, and this is clear when you look at personal testimonies from parents or adoptees in interracial families. When looking at interracial adoption, it is important to look at these personal testimonies because we are talking about people's lives being affected, and you can't just simply look at statistics. Through looking at personal experiences, it is made clear that there are many different ways race and culture can be addressed, such as choosing the area which your family will live in strategically, having conversations about the racial difference between you and your child, and knowing how to care for their different hair and skin needs. These will make a huge impact on your child as they grow up with a family who is of a different race. An article titled A White Sibling's Perspective on Interracial Adoption Part 2 by Ashley Foster shares the personal experience of Ashley Foster's adopted sister. Her parents adopted her sister interracially and wanted to raise her as their own, which meant not addressing the race difference. Because of this, they didn't care for her skin or hair any differently than they did their own, which caused her hair to dry out and frizz. This is just one example of how not addressing racial differences can have a negative effect as the child grows up and enters the world on their own. Joseph Harker, a very successful writer for The Guardian, highlights the very issue that if things are not done to address the racial differences between the parents and the adoptee, it can have negative effects. In Harker's article titled This Rush to Downplay Race Ignores the Truth of Interracial Adoption, published in The Guardian, he explains his personal experience with interracial adoption. Harker grew up with his white mom and his Irish stepfather. His birth father was African, and this meant that he was growing up in a home of which he had very little racial similarity to anyone else in the home. Harker states in his article, I was never short of love, support, and encouragement, but when race regularly collided with my life, I was ill prepared. I found it difficult to cope with the playground and classroom taunts, and as I grew older, the disconnect with my African heritage became more of an issue. His personal experience stresses the importance of addressing racial differences at a young age, and as a parent, being able to surround your child with other people they can racially relate to. With that being said, race is not the only difference that needs to be addressed. Culture differences are also very important to address as well. Acknowledging the culture difference between you and your child is very important as well, and these differences can be acknowledged by taking courses to learn more about your child's heritage as well as needs specific to their heritage, visiting the country or place that your child is from, and just simply cooking foods from your child's heritage and celebrating holidays specific to them. Being brought to the United States from your home country to be interracially adopted can be an amazing experience, or it can have negative effects. The personal experience of Quinny and Leanna Beresma is an example of how being exposed to one's heritage when interracially adopted has positive effects on the adoptees. The Beresmas are a family made up of two girls, Quinny and Leanna, adopted from China, and a biological son, Grant. And the mother states that throughout the girls' childhood, the family was involved in groups to keep their girls in touch with their Asian heritage, and in the summer they would attend summer camps with other children from China. The family also returned to China to visit the orphanages in which the girls had stayed, which helped to fill in missing pieces and any questions the girls had about where they came from. Quinny states, I have always had opportunities to learn more about my culture. And Leanna says, visiting China was an eye-opening experience, and I liked learning about a different way of living. We always celebrate the Lunar New Year and visit Chinese supermarkets to cook authentic Chinese food at home throughout the year. This personal experience shows how important it is to not only acknowledge the racial differences in interracial families, as well as the cultural differences. When children are brought to the United States, it is important to make sure they still feel in contact with their own culture. The Beresma family shows that you can do this by visiting where the children came from or just simply exposing them to authentic foods they would eat if they were in their home country. As far as acknowledging the racial differences in the family, Quinny and Leanna would attend summer camps and other activities with people of Asian descent so they would not constantly feel alienated or different. Although these things can be done to make sure interracially adopted children know their culture and race, some people still believe that race should be a priority when finding children in the foster care system a permanent home. Asher Isaacs was the product of interracial adoption. He shares his story in an article titled Interracial Adoption, Permanent Placement and Racial Identity, An Adoptee's Perspective, which was published in UCLA National Black Law Journal. His birth mother is white and his birth father black, and he was adopted into a Jewish family which lived in a suburb of Buffalo, New York. He states, "My adoptive parents believed that the world should be colorblind, so they raised me in the same way as they raised their 3 biological children. My family never addressed the fact that my skin was brown or my hair curly." Later stating, "My parents did not see a need to expose me to black culture, history, or role models." He says that while growing up, he felt as though he fit in pretty well to his predominantly white community, but he went off to college, and that was when he felt even more confused about his racial identity. Because of Asher Isaacs' personal experience with interracial adoption, he believes that although a family can do these things to attempt to make their child feel connected to their race and culture, no matter what you do, it will not be the same as growing up in a family of the same race and culture. So that is why he believes that race needs to be a priority when finding children in the foster care system a permanent home, and they should not be put in a family who does not share the same race as them. Now, this may be true. Of course, being interracially adopted will never be the exact same as growing up in a family who shares the same race and culture as you. But when majority of adoptions in the United States are interracial, we cannot sit back and keep all of these children in foster care simply because the loving home that wants to adopt them is not of the same race as them. That is why it is so very important to address the racial and cultural differences. If it was a perfect world, maybe interracial adoption would be far less common and children would be able to grow up in homes of the same race as them, so there was no chance of them ever being confused about their race or culture. But unfortunately, it is not a perfect world. And not every child will be able to grow up in a home that shares the same racial identity and culture as them. This is why, if interracial adoption is going to occur, other precautions need to occur as well.